Eye Contact, a Mark Manning Mystery, Book 2. Author, Michael Kraft. Publisher, Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Monday, June 28th. Monday morning has dawned hot and sticky in the city. Chilled air gushes from vents in the loft, where east windows brighten with a white sky. There are no telltale signs that a mob partied here Saturday night. All is in order for the start of a new week. It will be a busy one for both Neil and Manning. The opening of Celebration 2000 on Saturday is now only 5 days away, and Neil is up to his neck in last-minute committee work. The little time he's spent at the office lately has been occupied by preparations for the festival, and he's had to rely on other architects in the firm to pick up some of his work. But there's a big project, a corporate headquarters, that's been backburnered too long, needing his attention before it can proceed. He decided to arrive early at the office today in order to spend some time working on it, uninterrupted. So he's up with the sun this morning, showered and dressed, already brewing coffee in the kitchen. Manning is due for a challenging week as well, in contrast to Neil, who knows exactly what he must accomplish during the next few days. Neil has a clipboard with a checklist that keeps getting longer, not shorter. Manning is faced with the uncertainties of not one but two vexing stories. He knows that Professor Zarnick's claimed discovery is a fraud, as is the actor who claims to be Zarnick. He fears that Nathan Cain has been unwittingly drawn into some far-reaching conspiracy, but he hasn't a clue as to the nature of the plot or the motive behind it. Further, all his instincts suggest that the Zarnick plot is somehow related to Cliff Nolan's murder. And yesterday, while going through Nolan's desk, he discovered to his utter dismay that the esteemed science editor had a dark side, a taste for dirt. Worst of all, Manning has knowingly misled his readership, and that, more than anything, goads him to get some answers fast and set the record straight. Like Neil, Manning has risen earlier than usual. This morning he appears from the shower wearing a pair of linen shorts, then pads down the stairs to find Neil pouring coffee. He gives Neil a kiss, stands back to look at him, and steps near again to tweak the knot of his tie. "You are the early bird today. No time for—" "Afraid not," Neil tells him, patting Manning's thigh. "If I can just get through this week, we'll get our lives back. I promise." He hands Manning a mug of coffee and sits at the breakfast table to review his clipboard. "Is the paper here yet?" Manning asked while rummaging inside the refrigerator. "You won't find it in there. Want me to check?" "No, thanks, kiddo. I'll go look." Crossing to the door, he notices Neil studying the list. "Nose to the grindstone already, huh?" Immersed in thoughts of the chores that await him, Neil doesn't answer. Manning joins him at the table, spreads open the freshly delivered journal, and slurps from his mug as he glances over page 1. Nothing earth-shaking. Sunday, as usual, was a slow news day. Manning sips from his mug again and swallows. Neil does the same. Manning turns a page of the journal. Neil turns a page of his checklist. Sip, swallow, turn. Sip, swallow, turn. Even the letters are nowhere, Manning mumbles. Neil isn't listening. Sip, swallow, turn. Then something catches Manning's eye. "What?" Neil looks up. "A hot story?" "No," says Manning. "It's this ad." He slides the paper across the table so Neil can get a look at it. It's a full-page ad. Full color, too, congratulating Pavo Zarnick on his momentous discovery. "You've done Chicago proud," it trumpets. "The city of big shoulders welcomes you with open arms." There's a picture of Zarnick, another of the mayor, and a drawing of little planets playing hide-and-seek in a benign star-dusted universe. The ad concludes, "The office of the mayor salutes one of Chicago's favorite sons." Neil looks up from the paper. "Pretty lame." "Yeah," Manning snorts his agreement. "It's also a waste of tax dollars. Do you have any idea what that page cost?" Neil shrugs. "Thousands." Manning rises, stands behind Neil, and looks over his shoulder at the ad. "If you ask me, it's an overly generous gesture if it's simply intended to make Zarnick feel good. Other than that, what's the point?" Neil shrugs again, and then notices something on the page. He peers close. Aha! He taps his finger on a line of agate type buried at the bottom of the ad. Manning strains to focus. It's a bit early for that, babe. What does it say? Neil reads. Paid for by the office of the mayor, City of Chicago. Victor Utley, cultural liaison to the world. You're kidding, says Manning. Neil tells him. Until last night, I'll bet you didn't even know we had a cultural liaison to the world. Point is, it's been sort of hush-hush. It's a patronage job, naturally. Victor Utley is related to someone who must have had a favor coming. The position was dreamed up a few months ago, and Victor fits it to a T. He's an intellectual bureaucrat whose job is on the line. What does he actually do? Good question. Basically, he just bugs the festival committees. I don't think he means to be intrusive. He's looking for something to justify his paycheck. Manning circles the table and faces Neil from across the newspaper. So this ad is meant both to congratulate Zarnick and to pump up the esteem of Utley's office. Exactly. God. Manning takes his coffee from the table and crosses the room, rising several steps to a platform area in front of the big east windows. He gazes vacantly at the sky, squinting through the sunlight, thinking. Neil moves the paper aside and returns to the perusal of his checklist. Manning turns backlit by the white haze and asks, Victor Utley, who is this guy? Does he have any qualifications as a cultural ambassador? More amused than annoyed by the repeated interruptions, Neil closes the pad on his clipboard and shoves his chair back a few inches, sitting sideways to face Manning. He's no Alistair Cook, but he seems well versed in the arts, mostly theater. He was an out-of-work actor, waiting tables somewhere before he lucked into the mayoral appointment. Good thing his uncle's a ward boss. Neil winks. Manning raises the mug to his lips and drinks. With his other hand, he scratches his scalp, then rubs the back of his neck. Thinking aloud, he says, It's curious that Utley would make such a hoopla about Zarnick. Utley's job security would seem to be dependent more upon the success and prestige of Celebration 2000. What interest would a cultural liaison have in astronomy? It doesn't fit, does it? Manning's question was rhetorical, and Neil doesn't bother to answer. Instead, he simply watches Manning as he poses in thought, nearly naked on the platform that displays him as if on a stage. Gaping windows give the world a glimpse of the profoundly beautiful man whose intimacy has been Neil's alone to savor for the past 2 years. Something stirs between Neil's legs. He grins. I'd take you here and now, he telepaths, but I'm ready for the office and duty calls. No time to linger. Sorry. Manning says, Too weird. Just yesterday, Cliff Nolan's neighbor told me that the man she saw at Cliff's door had a limp. And I'm still not sure if I should believe her. When she told me this, Victor Utley sprang to mind. He fits the description perfectly. But I couldn't imagine that he would have any connection to either Pavo Zarnick or Cliff. Now, this splashy ad, who knows? He doesn't strike me as a killer, if that's what you're driving at. Neil is talking about Victor Utley, but he's thinking about Manning. Damn, what a hot man right there in front of him. His for the asking. By the way, don't be thrown by his vain manner. He's straight. Thank God. He's straight? Sure is. Neil steps up to the platform and drapes his arms over Manning's shoulders. But guess what? I'm not. I'd heard rumors to that effect. Neil presses his mouth to Manning's. Their tongues meet and they taste each other's coffee. Neil likes that amaretto-flavored cream while Manning takes it black. Manning's passions quickly rise, and so does the lump in his shorts. He tells Neil, Take your clothes off. Can't. No time. He drops to his knees, takes the coffee from Manning's hand, sets the mug down, and hooks his thumbs in the waistband of Manning's shorts. There's time for this, though. and he shucks them to the floor. Manning's head lolls backward as Neil's face nuzzles his crotch. There they are, one naked, the other fully dressed. On stage before an anonymous city, thousands of waking eyes may be watching. More likely, none at all. Manning's arms hang limp, his fingers tracing lazy circles on the temples of the man who loves him. Manning's eyelids flutter, revealing strobe flash glimpses of the ceiling of the room where he is worshipped by the man who kneels before him as if dreaming. Manning feels himself slipping down Neil's throat. He's needed this. They've needed this. The phone rings. Neil's teeth clench. Manning's eyes pop. Sorry, Neil tries to mumble, but it sounds more like foggy. They attempt to ignore the intrusion and get back to business, but it's impossible. The moment has passed. Thanks, anyway, says Manning, bending over to plant a kiss on Neil's head. It might be important. Manning trots to the kitchen and answers the phone. Oh, hello, Gordon. Neil, satisfied that the unwelcome call is not for him, rises from his knees, checking his watch. He whisks his hair and clothes with his hands, picks up Manning's shorts and coffee, and heads for the kitchen. Gordon Smith's voice tells Manning, Sorry to bother you so early, Marco. No bother at all, Manning lies. He and Neil roll their eyes at each other. The editor continues. Nathan Cain just phoned me. Neil has rinsed their cups and put the clipboard in his briefcase. He's ready to head out, but he still has Manning's shorts shoved under one arm. Smith says, he wants to see us in the inner sanctum again. 30 minutes. Neil approaches, flips the shorts onto Manning's head like a big floppy beret, then gives Manning's penis a jaunty goodbye tug. It's still wet with Neil's spit, but has shrunken fast in the air conditioning. Seconds later, Neil is out the door. There's a touch of nervousness to Smith's chuckle as he suggests, better get cracking, Marco. Resigned to a morning that just isn't working out right, Manning tells him, No problem, Gordon. Half an hour later, riding the private elevator to the top of the Journal building, Manning asks Smith, Did Cain say what he wanted? Smith shakes his head. I assume he wants an update on Cliff Nolan, or an account of your meeting with Zarnick. Either that, he says, Manning, or he wants to know how his star reporter managed to screw up the Sunday lead. Bingo! I doubt that, Smith says. The door slides open, the security guard nods. He's been expecting them, and they are admitted without comment into Cain's outer offices. The receptionist rises, also without comment, and escorts them down the hall, past the secretarial pool, where the 4 desks are not yet occupied, since it's barely 8 o'clock. When they arrive in Lucille Herring's office, the receptionist gives Manning and Smith a half-smile, and then turns and retreats to her desk. The office seems empty. Manning and Smith exchange a look that asks, Now what? And then someone rises from a desk behind a file cabinet. Their first glimpse of short-cropped, carrot-colored hair confirms that Lucille Herring also got an early start this morning. Gentlemen, she says. It's a greeting without inflection that merely acknowledges their presence, as she's busy shuffling paperwork. Her eyes do not meet theirs. The colonel is expecting you. She crosses to the arched door that leads to Cain's office, reaches for the knob, and turns back toward Manning and Smith. She at last looks Manning in the eye, but her face seems utterly featureless, even more so than before. The slightest cock of her head signals that they should enter. The situation is entirely too weird for Gordon Smith's down-home nature as he passes Herring on his way into Cain's office. With Manning, he tells her, Cheer up, Lucy. I don't much care for Monday mornings either. She looks at him as if he's out of his mind. Awkwardly, yes. It was sure nice to see you at Marco's party Saturday. Too bad you had to skedaddle. She looks from Smith to Manning with a panicky expression that asks, How much do you know? What'd you tell him? Manning opens his mouth, searching for something to say, but before he could muster any words, she slips back into her office, closing the door behind her. Standing just inside the inner sanctum, Smith lowers his voice to ask Manning, What got into her? Beat me, Manning shrugs silently. A pervasive quiet fills the vast room, and Cain does not seem to be present. Last Thursday, however, Cain was lurking, listening somewhere in the library stacks. This time, Smith won't give his publisher the opportunity to eavesdrop, so he stifles his loquacious tendencies and prudently decides to zip it. He and Manning aren't sure what they should do, where they should go, but they feel silly standing there by the door, side by side. They walk with measured steps toward the high altar of Cain's desk, like timid munchkins approaching Oz. They look about. Smith clears his throat and calls out, "Nathan!" No response. From the side of his mouth, Smith tells Manning, "Must be in the crapper." With a clank of heavy brass hardware, the door to the publisher's private quarters opens, and Nathan Cain appears. He apparently spent the night here in the tower, for he still wears pajamas, silk, of course, the color of deepest burgundy. Over them he wears a copious robe, also silk of royal blue, that's almost black. If he wore a stovepipe hat, he'd look like a smoked Uncle Sam. "Good morning, Gordon," he says, dryly, then asks, "Mr. Manning." Nodding to each of them, he guides a pair of ostrich leather slippers across the parquet floor, moving toward the bar. "Can I get you something?" Manning's had his coffee, but I wouldn't mind some orange juice. Then he sees Cain pour himself a generous snifter of cognac. "No, thank you, sir." Smith asks, "Do you have any coffee, Nathan?" "I'll send for some," he offers, then crosses to his desk. He presses a button there, telling the gadget, "Coffee." He walks toward the seating area where they had their last discussion and flumps himself with difficulty onto one of the sofas, sloshing some cognac over the edge of his snifter. He wipes the side of the glass with his index finger, which he then licks with his finger still in his mouth. Smith says, "I was surprised to get your call so early, Nathan. What's up?" Nathan Cain doesn't need a reason to call underlings to his office. Day or night, maybe he felt like talking. Maybe he wanted company. "I thought Mr. Manning might appreciate my take on Sunday's Zarnick piece." "Ooh. Mr. Cain," Manning begins, but Cain cuts him off with a flick of his hand. "The story seemed a little thin. Not quite as much meat as I expected." Manning glances sideways toward Smith, who looks toward him with a nervous smile. Manning isn't sure how he can justify the story to Cain. He's buying time, and for Cain's own good, but he's not yet prepared to reveal his suspicions. Cain would expect proof, and Manning doesn't have it. "However," Cain continues, "on balance, I felt you did a commendable job of making a complex topic accessible to the general reader. Just enough technical mumbo-jumbo to be authoritative, but not overly long. Pithy, in fact." He raises his glass in a salute. "Well done, Manning." He drinks. Smith gives Manning an elbow nudge, all smiles. "See there, Marco? I said you nailed it, and you had doubts." Manning tells him, "One of these days, Gordon, I'll learn to take you at your word." Then he says to Cain, "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your vote of confidence, but in truth, that story was not my best work. There were some loose ends, factually, that I wasn't able to bring together before deadline." Cain asked, "The funding angle?" "Right. And the computer power. I wanted to be quantitative, but Zarnick was either unable of or unwilling to supply me with facts. What's more, he seemed totally thrown by my questions regarding his scientific method." "So you ran with what you had," says Cain, indifferent. "That's the nature of this business, Manning. I needn't explain that to you." He snorts his terse little laugh. "The main thing is Zarnick's on the level." There's a pause. "About his discovery." Pause. "Right?" Manning chooses his words with care. "His video demonstration was compelling. He's presented us, in effect, with a redrawn map of the solar system. If it's inaccurate intentionally or otherwise, the truth will eventually win out. It's possible, of course, that the video demonstration itself is some sort of fabrication, but I can't imagine any reasonable motive for deception. Why would Zarnick lie?" "Why indeed?" echoes Cain. He warps his brows in thought. Then he leans forward, elbows on knees, coddling the snifter with both hands. "Let me be frank about this. My contacts in Washington now seem satisfied that Zarnick isn't playing games, and that's really all that they've asked us to help them to determine. So we've done our job, and the favor has been repaid. But I have to tell you, Manny, that some of the issues you've raised have roused my own reporter's instincts. Would you like to keep digging on this a while longer? Manning tries not to appear too eager. That might be a good idea, Mr. Cain. A fine suggestion. Thank you, sir. See if you can get him to come up with those missing numbers. That's a start, says Manning. I'd also like to learn more about Zarnick's personal background. Since he's a foreigner, I haven't found much file material on him. Maybe some secondary interviews with other sources. Sounds good. Cain leans back in his seat, visibly more relaxed. And this time, Manning, there's no pressure, no deadline. Spend the next week on this. If you come up with something great, we'll run with it. If not, we'll chalk it off as an investment in responsible journalism. After all, the fourth, when things have calmed down, let's meet again and assess where we're at. Needless to say, if anything big develops, let me know at once. Gordon can give you my beeper number. Sound reasonable? Very, says Manning, thinking. Too good to be true. He arrived at this meeting prepared to squirm, anticipating Cain's displeasure with his recent work. Instead, he's been ordered to proceed exactly as he intended. Smith jots a phone number on the back of a business card and hands it to Manning, while asking Cain, "Can I assume Mark has carte blanche on this project?" "Absolutely. Entertainment, research fees, travel, whatever it takes to get to the bottom of this." Smith reminds Manning, "And you've still got David Bosch in your hip pocket." Manning responds dryly, "That's one way of putting it." Their conversation is interrupted by a rap on the door to the outer office. Head stern as Lucille Herring trundles in backwards, towing a service cart stocked with a huge silver coffee urn, carafes of various juices, cups, glassware, and ice. "Pardon the intrusion, Colonel," she says, "but the kitchen said you'd place an order." Before Cain has said, "Thank you, Miss Herring," she has positioned the cart near the bar, returned to the door, snapped to attention, bowed, and retreated. Cain says, "As I've mentioned before, she's a model of efficiency." As he rises and moves toward the cart, the others do also. "A coffee, Gordon?" "Sure, Nathan. Thanks." Cain pours a cup for himself as well as for Smith. "Mr. Manning, some orange juice would be great. How about something in it? Manning, an accelerator? Champagne, perhaps?" "No, thank you, sir." He hands the juice to Manning, coffee to Smith. They all sip. Cain's lips gnarl. He dumps the remainder of his cognac from the snifter into his coffee. Tastes again and exhales a grunt of satisfaction. Smiling, he tells them, "Ambrosia, gentlemen. Sheer silken ambrosia." He gulps half the cup, then shifts gears, saying to Manning, "Now, tell me about Clifford Nolan. What have you learned?" "Well, sir," Manning instinctively grabs for the notebook in his jacket, but withdraws his hand from it, deciding that his report to Cain will remain vague on crucial details. "I've identified several possible suspects at this point, none of them very firm. One is an eccentric neighbor whose motive may have been no stronger than her displeasure with Cliff's loud music, but others may have had stronger, darker reasons to kill Cliff." Both Cain and Smith look up from the coffee they are drinking. Manning continues, "Two possibilities have come to light. First, there may be some connection between Cliff's murder and Pavo Zarnick's discovery." "Such as?" asks Cain. His tone is skeptical. Manning is not yet prepared to reveal to his publisher that Zarnick is a fraud, so he simply tells him, "Cliff may have been writing about Zarnick at the time he was killed, and there's apparently some political interest in Zarnick's discovery, but at this point, I'm merely exploring a hunch." Cain swirls the mix of coffee and cognac. "And the other possibility?" Manning moves a step closer between Cain and Smith, tightening their circle. "Yesterday, while cleaning out Cliff's desk, I came across something very disturbing." Responding to Smith's questioning look of surprise, he explains, "I intended to meet with you, Gordon, first thing this morning to tell you what I found, but, well, here we are. I regret to inform both of you that Clifford Nolan was involved in an activity that should be a profound embarrassment to the journal. He had compiled dossiers, handwritten files of dirt, on numerous friends, colleagues, and public figures. He was running a profitable little sideline of extortion. "Christ," says Smith, sitting on the arm of the nearest sofa. "I wondered how he had managed that art collection on a reporter's salary. I should have suspected something." Smith is clearly crushed by this news, which reveals an entirely different facet of the science editor who had brought such esteem to the paper. Nathan may be similarly disheartened, but he does not show his emotions. All business, he says to Manning. "You mentioned colleagues. Do Clifford's files point to suspicion of anyone here at the Journal?" "Yes." Manning thinks of Lucille Herring, hoping Cain won't press further. Cain asks, "Do the files point to suspicion of anyone in this room?" "No, sir." Cain and Smith share a sigh of relief. Cain tells Manning, "Well done. By all means, proceed with your investigation. It sounds as if you're on the right track." Manning assures his publisher, "I'll do my best to sort this out. I'm wondering, though, what should I do with Cliff's files? Turn them over to the police?" Kay nods. "I suppose you'll have to." Then he reconsiders. "No. Wait. I'm loath to sound calculating, but the Journal has to guard its own interest in this matter. We've been riding a wave of sympathy in the wake of Clifford's murder, but if those files become public, we'll be the goat of Chicago journalism. Just proceed with your own investigation, Mr. Manning, and let the police proceed with theirs. If the files are useful to you in naming Clifford's killer, use them. Ultimately, we should destroy what's not needed." Manning concurs. "This is a gray area, I know, but it's important not to let these files get into the wrong hands. They would simply cause a lot of needless emotional pain. I have a call into a detective friend at police headquarters, but I won't mention this to him. At least not yet. I'm hoping he can tell me what was the last piece of music played on Cliff's CD player. Also, the ballistics test should be complete by now. Maybe he'll be willing to share some hard evidence. I'll phone him again as soon as I get back to my desk." "You needn't bother." Cain dismisses the idea with a flick of his hand. "The report came over the city newswire last night. There were 4 bullets in Clifford's body, but the ballistics tests were inconclusive. With no clues regarding the gun that killed him, the police are officially frustrated." He snorts his derision, presuming they have bungled. He turns and his gaze travels to the showcase that displays his collection of rare firearms. Noticing this, Smith walks over to the glass-colored cabinet. Tapping the window with a fingernail, he tells Cain, "I wish you'd let us run a feature on the collection. There's at least a dozen great stories in there. It's a natural for the Sunday magazine." "I'm flattered," Cain replies, "but I don't care to draw attention to it. Other collectors would get interested. There would be requests for visits from curators and academics. I don't care to be bothered by all that. The collection is private." Crossing to the display, Manning says, "Last time we were here, sir, you said you might share the history of the Nambu pistol." He peers through the glass at the gun in question, which sits on a small silk cushion, centered among the other weapons, gleaming in the beam of a miniature spotlight. The pistol itself is unremarkable, but its distinctive handle is inlaid with intricately carved jade. An easel near the cushion holds a gold-edged card that traces the gun's pedigree. Manning squints to read it. "Very well, gentlemen," Cain snorts, moving toward them. The story, that's a Nambu Type 2, a Japanese model that was rare to begin with, but this particular weapon is unique. As you might guess from the jade handle, it belonged to Field Marshal General Sagayama, the Japanese Minister of War. His wife nagged him into using it on himself in September of 45 to avoid being placed on trial for war crimes. After he did it, Cain slurps from his cup. "She poisoned herself." Smith chokes on his own coffee. "Whew," he says. "They are a strange race. Clever, but strange." With no humor, Cain tells Smith, "They are a people of high principles." Manning asks, "How did you acquire the General's gun, Mr. Cain?" "Our occupation forces were already in place in Tokyo, so it must have been picked up by one of the MPs investigating Sagayama's death. The pistol found its way back to the States and many years later was presented to me as a gift from an old Army friend, a buddy, you might say, who's now at the Pentagon. The Nambu has been the centerpiece of my collection ever since. Very impressive, sir. Manning sips his juice. Their small talk moves on to politics, new restaurants, the approach of Celebration 2000. At the mention of the festival, Cain waves an arm toward one of the huge Gothic arched windows that look out across the city. Even through this summer haze, the new stadium is visible a mile to the west. That tranquil view will change before our very eyes, gentlemen. The fate, I fear, will transform this fair city into a veritable zoo. Oh, I know the people will love it, and it'll be a boon for our circulation, but it'll bring with it that element of, a certain madness. I, for one, plan to be out of town next weekend. Smith is jovial. Not me, Nathan. Wouldn't think of missing the opening spectacle, and I've got a press pass. He pats his breast pocket, where he keeps the credentials, which truly are coveted. Anyone would be foolish to leave such a pass lying on a desk or even in an unlocked drawer. He adds, as for the congestion of the city, well, I guess that's inevitable, but it shouldn't be all that disruptive. Even as he speaks, workers on a scaffold winch their way up the outside of the tower, rising just above the stone gargoyles, stopping smack in the middle of the window, blocking the view. Cain watches them for a moment, then turns to Smith with a look that says, I told you so. That's been going on for a couple of weeks now. The workmen are conversing in shouts with unseen brethren, some on top of the tower, others apparently on another scaffold hanging below. Inside the particulars of this communication cannot be understood, reduced to muffled noise by the thick glass of the windows. There are repeated references to fucking, however, that are transmitted loud and clear. Manning stifles a laugh as he sips his orange juice. He asks his publisher, What are they doing out there? Cain breathes an exasperated sigh, preparing for the great civic clambake. Naturally, there's all manner of equipment to be installed atop the journal building as part of a laser show. We're to be one point of a triangle, I'm told. A pink triangle, in fact, Manning adds. You've heard about it then, says Cain. Smith interjects. I haven't. What laser show? I guess the plans haven't been made public yet, says Manning. But Neil told me about them as a surprise finish to the opening ceremonies and human rights rally. A giant pink triangle will appear over the stadium. There's some new laser technology involved, and the image will be simultaneously projected from the mast of 3 tall buildings, including this tower. Smith looks confused. What am I missing here? Why a pink triangle? For Christ's sake, snaps Cain. You're better read than that, Gordon. It's the symbol of gay liberation. Or pride, or whatever. Manning steps closer to Cain to tell him. And I must say, sir, that it's unexpectedly progressive and inclusive of the journal to take part in it. Don't be condescending, Manning. You're starting to sound like our bleeding heart archbishop. The fact is, the journal would appear unenlightened and prejudiced if we refused. I don't see that. We had a choice, and I won't pretend to like it. Manning smiles. Regardless of the circumstances, sir, I think the company is doing the right thing. Thank you. Don't mention it. Cain does not return the smile. Their conversation has grown louder to compete with the noise from outside. The window where winches now whine and scaffolding creaks as a huge, menacing contraption is hoisted into view. Holy shit, says Smith. It looks like something out of Flash Gordon. Jesus, echoes Manning. It looks like a gun. With no discernible emotion, Cain tells them, I believe it is a gun of sorts, probably part of the laser apparatus, one of the 3 projectors for the spectacle. Oh, says Smith. He should have guessed. He finishes his coffee and sets the cup on the cart. Beastly looking thing, though, says Manning, with a short, hesitant laugh. He can't take his eyes off the device. It has coils and armatures on an array of controls positioned in front of something like a tractor seat and a long, tapered snout, like the barrel of some high-tech weapon. The casing is painted a drab gray-green. Well, says Cain with a tone of finality, enough of this commotion. He steps to the window and turns the knob mounted in the trim. Heavy velvet blackout curtains emerge from pockets in the side walls and draw together over the glass. The workers' noise is reduced to a distant hubbub as the light in the room fades. Cain asks, "More juice, Mr. Manning?" The offer Manning knows is not meant to be accepted. "Thank you, sir, but no." He sets his glass on the cart next to Smith's cup. "I think we're all set." "Excellent." Cain begins crossing the room in the direction of the door. Clearly, Smith and Manning are being escorted out, and they walk along with him, one on each side. Cain tells them, "I'm glad we were able to have this little breakfast together." He eyes Smith with a facial tic that's not quite a wink, then swallows the last of his fortified coffee. He turns to Manning. "Keep up the good work, and do keep me posted." He gives the reporter a pat on the back. The gesture is unnatural to him, and he delivers it stiffly. When they pass through the door into the outer office, the pace of activity has picked up since their early arrival. Lucille Herring taps commands into a computer's keyboard, while an assistant stands nearby waiting for the diskette that Herring hands over without looking at him. Other minions scamper about the room, breaking stride just long enough to deliver a curt, "Good morning, Colonel." One of them takes the publisher's empty cup and whisks it away. No one seems fazed by the fact that he's standing there in his sleepwear. When Lucille Herring notices Cain in their midst, she quits her keyboard and stands facing him as if at attention. He tells her, "Mr. Manning is embroiled in some very important work and may be accruing some atypical expenses, travel and such, during the next week or so. Anything he sends through is authorized and approved." "Very good, Colonel." Cain thinks of something. He tells Manning, "You might find a laptop useful, a modem too. Miss Herring can set you up." "I'm already fully equipped," Manning assures him. "A pager?" "I have one, sir." "These days, who doesn't?" Smith interjects. Cain suggests, "Maybe a memory upgrade?" "I'm fine," says Manning. "Thank you, though." Cain thinks of something else. "Miss Herring, regarding that upgrade of the network server for these offices, we need to be certain that the new configuration won't allow users to breach the corporate mainframe. On a lighter note, he adds, too many people online these days. No telling what mischief some hacker might wreak if he gets access." Miss Herring nods, vigorously attuned to his concerns. "Security has been our top priority in every phase of the new design." He returns his attention to Smith and Manning. "Gentlemen, good day. You've got a newspaper to put out, and I've got to get dressed." He erupts into a hearty laugh, then smiles. It's a genuine smile for once, not the wooden expression he forces for banquet photos with the mayor or the archbishop. Waves, it's a single whirl of his hand that could pass for a salute, and retreats into the inner sanctum. The sturdy timbered door closes behind him with a thud. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.